Welcome. I am Emma Davis. To our lead story tonight, the Chief Government Statistician, Professor Samuel Kobina-Enim, has revealed that the educational and employment status of the heads of households has an enormous impact on the poverty status of a family. He disclosed this at the launch of the Multidimensional Poverty Index report in Accra. The report tells an important and persistent story about how prevalent poverty is within the Greater Accra region and provides insights into the lives of poor people. Professor Samuel Kobina-Enim is government statistician.
Ghana's National Multidimensional Poverty Index aims to complement traditional monetary poverty measures by offering a deeper insight into the multiple deprivations experienced by the poor, thereby providing valuable data for crafting more targeted and effective poverty reduction strategies. Government statistician Professor Samuel Enim emphasized in an interview with Joy Business that the report highlights the importance of directing development effort to specific geographical areas.
Why we do this is that it provides policymakers with a direct tool on how to intervene. And as we said, we identify households that have simultaneous deprivations across these indicators that I talk about. So in one particular area, their challenge could be that they have children at a given age that are expected to be in a class that they are below or behind that class. So in that particular geographical area, that should be the focus. In another area, it could be an issue of overcrowding. In another area, it could be an issue of school attendance. So it gives very specific targets for different geographical areas, and that is what we think would help have a balanced development going forward.
Professor Samuel Enim shared key findings of deprivations within the Greater Accra region.
You might assume that at the regional level it's doing very well, but you'll find pockets of areas within the region that are not performing well. What we really want to do with this is even go beyond the regional reports, which is giving us the performance of each district, and narrow down on each district and see the locality level variations that we have. So, and we are pretty sure that we're going to see also intra-district, as we see in intra-regional disparities when it comes to multidimensional poverty index. Another finding that I think is broadly standing out is the real importance of employment and education characteristics of the head of household. One would say that this goes without saying, but if we really know that reducing unemployment would eventually help us bring down our multidimensional poverty index, then this is a right opportunity to do that. So these heads of household characteristics broadly have shown to influence the household status when it comes to multidimensional poverty.
The Multidimensional Poverty Index report comprehensively covers all 261 metropolitan, municipal, and district assemblies.
We are joined on Zoom by Head of National Accounts at the Ghana Statistical Service, Francis Bright-Mensah, to gain more insight into the Multi-Dimensional Poverty Report. Thank you very much, Francis, for joining us. Can you tell us the purpose of this report and how it influences government's policy to addressing poverty issues?
And good evening to your childish listeners. So just as the government statistician indicated, this is a report to supplement the usual monetary poverty report that we churn out, and this is being produced for all the 261 districts. So today, we did that for the Greater Accra district.
Right.
So you see, poverty comes in different dimensions, and for us to tackle poverty, then we have to have a multi-purpose approach to really tackle poverty.
Okay, can you share with us some of the interesting findings you got?
Yeah, so for Greater Accra region, we disseminated for Greater Accra region, and just as we're doing for all the other regions are having that. So one issue that the government statistician talked about is when we look at the educational characteristics of the head of household, we saw that as much as about 26.7% of households or individuals who live in household with head of education are multidimensional, or that is the head of education. The head of the household has no
Okay, yeah, seems we may have lost Francis there. As a
Of
Hi, Francis, your line was breaking a little bit. If you could
the head
take your
of
point
house.
again. Right, we seem to be having challenges with Francis's network, so we'll try and reconnect with him. But we'll move on to one of our headline stories. Researchers have cited the lack of credit opportunities and effective targeting as some downsides of government's flagship programs at a workshop organized by the Third World Network to assess the impact of two flagship programs of government. Those are Planting for Food and Jobs and One District, One Factory. Lead researcher for the project, Dr. Faustina Obeng, highlighted the lack of targeted credit support as a major challenge to the two initiatives. There's more in this report.
Government launched two flagship programs, One District, One Factory, and Planting for Food and Jobs to revive Ghana's domestic manufacturing and agriculture sectors. On Planting for Food and Jobs, the report highlighted the poor credit management system and the lack of available markets for produce. The report, which was commissioned by the Third World Network, was on the impact of government's flagship programs in the southern sector. Dr. Faustina Obeng is the research lead for the project.
Although there is a general reach of farmers, because over the years the cost of the inputs of the PFJ increased, we saw that many small-scale farmers who could not access their inputs without some credit could no longer use the package. The package is an improved seeds with a fertilizer, but also with extension support. For many of these improved seeds, they are heavily dependent on fertilizers because they suck a lot of nutrients. And so without being able to afford the fertilizer, even if you afforded the seeds, your productivity would not likely increase. We all see what the slight increase in import bills meant for fertilizers within the PFJ. So we need to have a long-term plan, improving productivity with locally available materials and only supplementing it with a slight fertilizer or mineral fertilization that we can afford.
On the One District, One Factory initiative, Dr. Obeng cited the lack of funding and constant supply of raw materials as a major challenge.
The level of the loan to be able to put up a whole factory, keep the factory running, was the challenge. For some of the factories that are still running, it's because the owners or the management of the factories are injecting additional private funds into the factory. Then the other thing is we assume that raw materials would not be a challenge. Some of the factories are lucky, raw materials is not a challenge per se, but quite a number of the factories are also struggling to access raw materials because it turns out that we don't have an overproduction of crops that would feed into raw material.
Coordinator of the Third World Network, Dr. Yao Graham, details the rationale of the report.
So we saw the initiative as positive, but we also knew how challenging those initiatives are because it's been tried before, but we are still here for these two initiatives to be tried again. And our hope in launching this research was the big picture objective was to find out how the issue of structural economic transformation informed the design of the two projects. The two projects, do they have a coherence? Are they coordinated in terms of how they are supposed to link up?
We are joined by the General Secretary of the Agriculture Workers Union, Edward Carrera, via phone to discuss this. Mr. Carrera, thank you very much for joining us. What do you make of the report?
Yes, let me say good evening to you and to all those who are listening to us. I think this is a very important report, and then to the extent that it has come to confirm all the things that we were already looking at. In fact, this report has come at the end of an implementation of those projects, the Planting for Food and Jobs program, One District, One Factory, One Village, One Dam, and that it is now giving the outcome of the implementation of those projects. But we had already seen, because we were part of the implementation, we were stakeholders and all these areas. So we saw that it was not going on well. We continuously raised attention. The government dismissed all that. Now, I think we have indicated that, look, to talk about the fertilizers that were given to farmers, they were not of the right quality. They were of low quality value to the agricultural sector and to the farmers. So what do you expect? You have a low output. The seed was not also of quality. In fact, in some instances, grain was given to the farmers as seed. And the difference between grain and seed is that when the rate of germination is very, very low with grain. But so if you start your farm and the rate of germination is already low, no matter how well you take care of your farm, the total output will be low because plant population will be low. So all these things were there. We raised alarm about them. And I just don't see, they were not able to prove the scientific relationship between the Planting for Food and Jobs program and that of the one district, one factory. Because if you say that every district should have a factory, they are going to source their raw materials from from each district, and they grow almost the same time. So how do you duplicate the same factories in every district? And you expect to have the raw materials. They do not also take into account that the raw materials they are talking about, even though they are agricultural based, they are seasonal. The factories don't operate on seasonal basis. They are supposed to operate throughout the year based on a minimum supply of raw materials, which they do not factor into. So certainly it was planned without real thinking through and linking them up, those projects.
Right. Although the second phase of the project has been launched, we don't seem to hear much about it. Have your concerns been addressed? Have they been, considered in the phase 2? What do you think are some of the policy gaps? Maybe you can reiterate them for government to hear them.
For some of us, because we believe in the practicality of things. We don't believe in theory. If you talk about the PFG 2.0, that is the part 2. Where is it? Does it exist in theory or it exists in practice? When you go to the ground, will you find it there? If it is not there, it means it does not exist. So the mere fact that you say that you have got a PFG part 2 does not necessarily mean that it exists. So you can have in the books that it is there, but on the ground it is not there. Look, as we speak now, where is the level of implementation of the PFG phase 2? It has not yet started on the ground. So how can you say that it exists? So certainly it matters not whether our concerns were taken care of. Because even if your concerns are taken care of and implementation is not done, then those concerns are not still really taken care of. Farmers don't have the inputs today. The farming season for the southern part is almost coming to an end because harvesting just began. And then, so that major season has just passed without the intervention of the phase 2. And we are not even knowing when it will even start. Even for the northern part of the country, they have already begun their season, and the inputs are not yet available. So at what time are you now bringing the inputs to give to the farmers to apply and expect to have good yields? So certainly the part 2 has not yet begun in practice.
Right. Per your observations, you say the part 2 has not begun. What are industry players also doing about it?
Well, what do we have to do about it? Because those who have the power and authority to ensure that it starts are saying that are not ready to do it. Because those who are paid with taxpayers' money to implement this must tell us what they are doing about it. Because you can't be telling us that there's part 2, and when on the ground, go and ask the farmers whether they are experiencing anything like part 2. So who is deceiving who? Must they deceive the public that, we have got the part 2, but meanwhile it's not implemented? They must be accounting for all this. So I think that the public officials who are responsible for implementing the part the Part 2 and are telling us that the Part 2 is in operation, they should show us where the Part 2 is and who is benefiting from it.
Okay, Mr. Kare, in the medium to long term, how do we shape some of these policies to ensure maximum impact?
Well, once we need to appreciate that we should not be applauding policy intentions. So, and then we appear not to have learned our lessons that even if a policy is good and you don't implement it at the right time, then you will not have the results. So here we are. What we need to do in the short term, it looks very difficult to have a short-term solution because agricultural production also has some gestation period. For instance, if you're growing maize, if you plant the maize, it needs about 3 to 4 months so that you can harvest. So from now until 4 months time, the state cannot, radically intervene to increase agricultural production because we have missed the period. More importantly, we don't even have irrigation so that we can see that if the rains even fail us and leave us out, then we can use the water that we have trapped in the dams to do that. If you look at the southern part, even we cannot have dams again because all those dams will be filled with galamsey water, which is not good enough for irrigation purposes. So there is no short-term solution to it. The only thing is that we have to appreciate that what we are going through, it is not going to go away anytime soon unless we sit back and look at long-term, beginning next year, to make sure that by the beginning of the agricultural production season next year, we have all the inputs and done all the necessary work to begin and support farmers to produce.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Kare. Edward Kare is the General Secretary of the General Agricultural Workers Union. But now let's take you back to our earlier story where the Ghana Statistical Service brought a report on the status of poverty in Ghana, and we are joined again by the head of accounts at GSS. He is Francis Mensah. Mr. Mensah, you are making some interesting points about the findings in the report.
Yeah, so for Greater Accra region, we realized that about 11.7%, that translates to about 629,000 people, are multidimensional poor. Now, we saw disparity across the districts within the region. And when we look at some of with this poverty level, what if we look at the characteristics of the heads of the households of these house? And we realize that there's variety or the disparity across the districts. If you look at a head of a household who has no education, we're seeing the poverty level ranging from about 16% in one of the districts to a high of about 52%. If you look at the industry in which heads of households work, for example, we could see that for those households who are not working, poverty level were ranging between 27% into about 67%. That is within Greater Accra region. So we see a lot of disparity, even though at the regional level, the poverty is around 11.7%. When you look at various characteristics of the heads of household, we see disparity across the districts within the region.
We understand the service will be launching another report which will look at the whole country. How different will that be?
Yeah, so hopefully next week the national report will be launched. For now, what we're doing is at the regional level, and definitely you will see some variation. Just as I'm saying that within the region, for instance, Greater Accra, we see variation, disparity, pockets of poverty within the various districts. At the national level, definitely we are going to see some disparity among the regions, and hopefully next week that will be disseminated.
Right, we look forward to that report. Thank you very much, Francis Mensah, for your time. He is the head of national accounts at the Ghana Statistical Service. Moving on, the stabilization of the Ghana cedi against the major foreign currencies is expected to continue this week. This follows a 1% gain by the local unit against the US dollar last week, narrowing its year-to-date loss to 18.01%. Here's more in this report.
Gradually, the cedi is finding its footing against the major trading currencies after weeks of rough patches. This is due to the slowdown in foreign exchange demand. The measures by the Bank of Ghana have been helping to keep the local unit afloat. The local currency recovered in value against the dollar, pound, and euro last week. After ironing out pertinent issues, Ghana and its official creditors concluded discussions on the $5.4 billion debt restructuring. The country is in the final stages of signing a memorandum of understanding with the creditors. This agreement will enable it to obtain approval from the International Monetary Fund on the second review, leading to the disbursement of $360 million under the $3 billion extended credit facility later this month. Analysts believe this inflow, coupled with funds from multilateral partners, will bolster foreign exchange liquidity and help stabilize the cedi.
Meanwhile, economic analyst at Data Bank, Kweko Akokomsin, has indicated that the local currency is not out of the woods yet, despite a 1% gain against the dollar this week.
My best, I would say it may be just early days yet. Because what we saw and some commentary we are seeing on the market, especially for the opening sessions of this week, we are seeing some demand come back onto the market, at least from the manufacturing side. Although we still see rates a bit stable, so I think it will be more prudent for us to really wait and see how the pressures fully emanate across the week, and also translate in terms of if there are any speculative underlying activities also driving the depreciation as we see. Most of the discussion on this subject matter is mainly stemming from the doubling down the central bank governor made in the presser for the MPC, that as much as possible they have the means to intervene and come into the market. And given that we are looking up to about 360 million from the IMF, looking at the 250 that we got from the World Bank, and also about 100 million from the African Development Bank, I mean, this is quite significant in terms of strengthening the central bank's intervention capacity. I think the only doubt thrown in this subject matter is the fact that one of the key objectives of the IMF program is to rebuild our international reserves sustainably. I think that's the one key thing we try to look at. But on the face of it, I mean, that helps get some liquidity in the market and also helping any intervention from the central bank. So, like we are mentioning, it could be significant, but not necessarily in the very immediate scenarios. We are looking at a more medium-term scenario where the central bank is more stable in terms of its reserve position and then intervene on the market.
That'll be all for today on Business Live. I am Emma Davis. For more news, do log on to myjoyonline.com. Do enjoy the rest of your day.